Sweet Caroline. Yeah, that
Santita, I
happened.
can't
It
hear
was
you
part
now.
of Global Citizens Vax Live concert outside Los Angeles Sunday that also featured Eddie Vedder.
Can you hear you now?
Calvin and
Can you hear
her.
me now?
The concert will be shown on ABC,
Yeah,
CBS,
but I'm
and
hearing
YouTube
the
on Friday
show
to
on top
encourage
of you.
vaccinations against
It's
COVID.
very, very loud.
So I'm wondering about that. I'm not playing the auto mix to you.
The vaccine.
Well, clearly, if you can make note of that.
Can you hear it now?
Can you hear me now?
All right, I get you now.
Okay. If
Yes,
you could
ma'am.
if you do me a favor, not do me a favor, I just need you to do this after the show. If you would make note of, if you would send me an email with that, Reverend Thurston, just very quickly, and Dylan, if you would just make note of the fact that what did you say? You were not playing auto mix.
Yeah. So you can hear the show in the back.
I need you to make note of that and just send me a quick email so that I can, when I speak with Mark and Matt today, I will share that with them. And I will share that with Jim as well.
Okay.
Okay? Because that is what they're hearing. I'm having to shout over, and they can tell when the volume on my voice is when it's been elevated.
Yeah.
So you can't. You're listening to the audio on the show, the playback of the show. I need to listen to it. I can tell you what my voice is supposed to sound like. And if we work together, we can get this right. Okay? Dylan?
Love it. Yes.
Okay, very good. Because this is all I'm trying to do is engage in critique with you to make you better.
Right, I know, and I understand that, and I'm trying to make sure that the show sounds correct. So
no, it's got to sound correct. It's my show, and it's played on this station.
Right.
And what we're trying to do is bring more ears to progressive radio. That's all I'm doing this in service of that. And I do two other national shows, so I'm trying to bring this to you as well. So I'm not just trying to push you over. I also know that you do not have years of experience in this particular position. So I'm trying to bring as much as I can to you so we can get this right. My name is on this show. My name is on the line. I cannot have my reputation trashed because the show's quality is not what it needs to be. That does not reflect negatively on you. It reflects on me and reflects on the station. I'm sorry I have to go here like this right now, but this is what I'm trying to do. This is not to be offensive. This is to go on the offense and to have a great show. Okay?
Right, I know, and that's why I was trying to figure out the issues, before 6:05. But that's fine.
Send you an email after the show with what you just said.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you very much.
And you should definitely speak to them as well.
No, I'm going to do that, but I need you to give me the information so that the more information I have, the more informed conversation I can have with them. Please just do what I'm asking you to do, and that will help me get on my way. Okay? Because you've heard 3 people this morning.
Okay.
Can't hear me. Okay. Hey, Linear Bob. Hey, Brian Martin. How you doing? And Renee and Daryl and Adrian and Shirley from Philadelphia. So many of you, Deborah and Raphael. How you doing? How you doing? How you doing, everybody? You know what? Today, Reverend Thurston, we might have an overturned trial, a mistrial, with the Derek Chauvin case, because they have a photo. Well, we're up now. Always let me know that we're coming in.
Okay.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. What a joy it is to be with you today on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station and the voice of progressive Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul's, AM 950 radio. I want you to call me or text me at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. And let's have some conversation today. We've got to talk about COVID numbers. They're going down. And Los Angeles, for the first time in 410 days, reported 0 COVID-19 deaths. More and more states are completely opening up, not requiring masks. They're doing that in Georgia, for example. Do you feel comfortable with that? And how can you protect yourself, whether you have gotten the shots or whether you have not? Let's talk about what these shots actually do, how and why you need to protect yourself I mean, in terms of your diet, all of that. We're going to be talking about that with Dr. Deborah Verholden and Dr. Shanina Knighton, one of the few infection prevention specialists in the world. Both of them are brilliant and they're at the top of their particular professions. And then we're going to be talking about something big that's happening in Big Pharma. We have West Virginia is taking 3 of the pharmaceutical giants to court to sue them for flooding their counties with opioids. 90,000 people got 100 million pills. 90,000 people got 100 million pills. How does that work, everybody? How does that happen? Got a whole lot to talk about today on the Santita Jackson Show. And then Crystal Mason, a young woman who had been in jail. She thought that she was able to vote. Her mother encouraged her, now that you're out of jail, go vote. But she was actually on probation. So she wasn't clear on the finer points of what she could and could not do. Of course, she got a prison sentence. And that the gentleman who voted for a dead person, and his mom, and he got a slap on the wrist, a Trump supporter. I don't know if it's because he's a Trump supporter, Republican, white guy, I don't know. But we're going to talk about those 2 standards of justice as we're looking at securing the vote. I'm Santita Jackson. I want to hear from you at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Let's get to some of these headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. Chicago will have a high of 55 degrees, cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 59 degrees, partly cloudy. The Dow closed up 238 points yesterday. S&P 500 closed up 11 points. The NASDAQ closed down 67 points. What a day in Major League Baseball yesterday. The Twins were triumphant over the Rangers 6-5, and today they'll be playing the Rangers once again. White Sox versus Cincinnati today at 5:40. And the Cubs will have a doubleheader with the Dodgers. Go Cubs! Hey, everybody. Young teens could soon be eligible for the vaccine. What do you think about that? Daily U.S. COVID-19 case and death totals are now about 1/5 of what they were during the peak winter months. And many experts attribute some of the shutdown to climbing vaccine numbers. Some of it. What about the rest of it? We'll have to ask Dr. Knighton and Dr. Deborah Verholden about that. Nearly 83% of Americans 65 or older have received at least one COVID vaccine. 2 in 5, really 39% of Americans are fully vaccinated. If you read these numbers, you're going to hear they toss a lot of different numbers around. Somewhere between 40% and 32% of Americans are fully vaccinated. The numbers are inching up every day. Today is World Press Freedom Day, everybody. World Press Freedom Day. And the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press on Monday released their 4th annual report about conditions that members of the U.S. media faced while on the job last year and revealed the startling extent of police violence against journalists in the United States during a year of protests. The report, published on World Press Freedom Day and launched in 2017, had some pretty startling findings. 438 physical attacks against journalists in the United States. 139 arrests, 110 cases of damaged equipment, 31 subpoenas, everybody. It was quite a year for journalists as they were covering demonstrations in the United States of America, praying for the people of Mexico City. They have a relatively new infrastructure, everybody, and their subway overpass collapsed in Mexico City, one of the most popular cities on earth, killing at least 23 souls and injuring 70. Wow, everybody. We're getting more and more reports about that as the day goes on. Please keep it locked here on WCPT and AM 950 radio so that you can get the latest on that. Derek Chauvin Jr., Brandon Mitchell. Well, it turns out that he might have done something that could help the appeal, according to legal experts. That's right. He was seen wearing a BLM T-shirt. That's right. It's a photo that's making the rounds on social media, attending the March on Washington back in August, which commemorated the 57th anniversary of the King historic I Have a Dream speech. He said for his portion, it was huge to get people geared for voter turnout. So being a part of that, being able to attend You know, the same location where Martin Luther King gave his speech was an historic moment. Either way, I was going to D.C. for this event, even if George Floyd was alive. Well, a number of legal sources, though, including those familiar with the trial, told a local Minneapolis St. Paul station that this juror, at a minimum, will have to be questioned in what's called a Schwartz hearing. And depending upon his answers, a mistrial could be declared. Stay tuned. You know the Santita Jackson Show is going to be all over this, everybody. Shockingly, painfully, one of the world's really most prominent couples, Bill and Melinda Gates, the head of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, probably the most prolific private foundation in the world. They are getting divorced. They got married in 1994. They have 3 children who are adults now, the youngest of whom is 18. One is in medical school. I mean, over the last 27 years, they said, we have raised 3 incredible children and built a foundation that works all over the world to enable all people to lead healthy, productive lives. We continue to share a belief in that mission and will continue our work together at that foundation, but we no longer believe we can go together as a couple in this next phase of our lives. We ask for space and privacy for our family as we begin to navigate this new life. Our love and prayers go out to them. Cannot be an easy time for that family. And the CPS, Chicago Public Schools CEO Janice Jackson announced her departure. Wow. And so she said, CPS has been an integral part of my life, first as a student, most importantly as a parent, and most humbly as a CEO. It is with that adoration that I have led this great school district as CEO for the past 4 years, and there's still more work to be done, but she is now done with CPS, at least as a CEO, everybody. Wow. Of course, we've got good news from the teaching pastor of the Salem Baptist Church, the House of Hope, the author of Mirror Moments. You've got to get that book because we're having a mirror moment as a society and, quite frankly, personally and interpersonally. We're having mirror moments. Give us the good news, Reverend Stephen Thurston II.
Hey, Santita. Yeah, we're having mirror moments on a daily basis. We got to keep that Windex available to keep that mirror clean so we can see what we need to see. As we have our mirror moments, we often find ourselves in this position of engaging in what I label as toxic positivity, though. And that's what I want to warn our listening audience about today. Because as we consume media and information on a daily basis, we find ourselves bombarded with a plethora of messages, many of which seek to encourage and inspire us. That's what I seek to do in our time of sharing on Tuesday mornings. And as I scroll through my Instagram feed, I often encounter messages that challenge me to maintain a positive perspective. I watch YouTube videos that push positivity. I hear sermons that push positivity. I even preached a sermon where I adorned a hoodie with the logo on the front saying positive vibes only. And while there is evidence that a positive perspective can be healthy and helpful, the reality is that as humans, we cannot program ourselves to only feel happy. Being positive, it's an important part and aspect of our mental state. But it's also okay and important for us to feel and embrace our difficult feelings and emotions, because denying or avoiding our unpleasant emotions does nothing more than cause them to grow. Avoiding our negative emotions positions us to subconsciously tell ourselves that we don't need to pay attention to them. And listen, that is a lie. As our negative feelings remain unprocessed, all they end up doing is growing and expanding. Think about a bottle filled with liquid. It can only hold so much before it explodes. And that same thing happens with us as human vessels. This positivity veil that many of us end up wearing where we present ourselves as this ray of sunshine 24/7, that's what we classify as toxic positivity. This is the concept of maintaining positivity only as the only way of life. And it suggests that focusing on positive things and rejecting anything that might trigger negative emotions is going to lead to a life of tranquility. And if you've fallen into this trap, let me help you out today. I want you to understand that it's okay to not be okay. more than 300 million people around the globe are suffering from depression. And what we often fail to realize is that the struggle between our real emotions and our projected emotions leads us to a place of deep suffering. We find ourselves painting this picture of positivity to the world that isn't real, and we have to stop doing that. Research has shown that accepting, not rejecting our negative emotions actually helps us to do better at diffusing our negative emotions and leads us to experiencing fewer negative emotions over time and experiencing better overall psychological health. So here's the short and simple of it, Santita. Your emotions need attention. The more that you deny them, the longer you stay at a surface level of personal understanding. Our difficult emotions contain valuable information, and we've been losing out because we're too busy trying to put on a happy face 24/7. We've got to develop the emotional courage to stop living in a place of wanting for permission to experience our pain and our grief and our distress. Our emotions, both positive and negative, they're here to serve to guide us. They help us to make sense of things, and that's why we've got to pay attention. We won't always be able to make sense of our emotions, but we can accept them and take comfort in the fact that they aren't permanent. Things can change. Things can get better, but we've got to accept the negative as well as the positive.
Count it all joy? Is that what you're telling us to do?
That's it. That's it. All of it matters. All of it comes together.
Okay. I like that. I like that. It joy and pain. Thank you, Frankie Beverly. I mean, Pastor Thurston.
Right. Yes. Listen, let me go put on my white outfit.
Don't forget the cap. Hey.
Gotta have the cap.
Oh, bless your heart. Now, I needed that today. I needed that because, in life, you got to take it all, everybody. You got to take it all of it, all of it. And our emotions are our guideposts. They do guide us along. Pastor Stephen Thurston, of course, he's a teaching pastor at the Salem Baptist Church, the House of Hope. He will be preaching. Will you be preaching this Wednesday night?
This Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, I'm going to be talking about Naked and Afraid. You don't want to miss it.
Okay, and how can we see that?
You can go to Salem Baptist Church of Chicago, Facebook, YouTube, or our website and catch the live stream. If you're in the Chicago area, WJYS is the television station where we air live, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time.
There you go. And how can we get your book?
You can go to Stephen J. Thurston. That's Stephen with the PH, StephenJThurston.com. The Mirror Moment book is there, and all of the other content that I have on leadership and relationship. I promise you, something is on that site that's going to bless, change, and challenge your life.
Amen to that. Had to let them know before you had to go. Pastor Stephen.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Santita.
Oh, I love you. Pastor Stephen Thurston, someone else for whom I have great admiration and love, Dr. Deborah Holden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University, one of the world's leading epidemiologists. We're going to be bringing on someone she's brought to our attention. Many of us did not even know what an infection prevention specialist is. Well, now we do. Dr. Shanina Knighton will be joining us as we really try to tease out Dr. Deborah Holden, all that's going on with this COVID-19 virus, this disease, as more and more states are fully opening up. But as they're opening up, we're finding out some good news, or is it good news? Los Angeles, there are 10 million people there. For the first time in 410 days, for 2 consecutive days, they've not had one COVID-19 death. Is that good news?
That's great news, especially if you compare it to other places across the globe. That is fantastic news. If that can be sustained, if that is something that can be maintained, that'll be the real tell. So, we have a goal. Get the spread down. Get, people vaccinated, get back to some semblance of life as people know it. And this is the stuff that it will take to do that. But no deaths is a good thing, and you can have that when you've got hospital beds available. That's a big part of that too.
Well, because I'm trying to find out. This is Los Angeles, And I remember when they were shutting Los Angeles down last year, and it just all of this seemed so surreal. Dr. Tepper for Holden.
Yeah.
And now for them to go from that and 410 days later, no deaths for 2 consecutive days. It just seems surreal.
Well, I think here's what's really crazy, though. The fact that not having a death from a preventable infectious disease for 2 days is like a cause to celebrate. I mean, it just shows how bad things have gotten and had gotten for many of us. Remember, I'm in Michigan, and we are just coming out of this recent surge. You know, we made all the media when things were really, really high. Cases dropped in my county 41% last week and 50% again this week. Nobody cares about that. That's not exciting. You know, but when we were the red hot state, when we were the state that had the most number of B117 variants, that was hot. People really cared about that. It's a mistake that we're making also in this pandemic. We're not sharing best practices. We're not creating communities of practice. We're not figuring out, and I will tell you, I have a big question mark over the state of Florida. I'm not sure if they're underreporting or if they truly are just, you know, spread has basically kind of gotten to where it's going to go, and they're, you know, out of the, you know, sort of danger of the big surges. I don't know. You know, there's no incentive for states and for cities to share information, to share best practices. There's no penalty for underreporting COVID cases. There's no penalty for underreporting COVID deaths. There's no penalty for not collecting race on COVID vaccines. You know, right now, information and data sharing is more important than ever, and there's nothing in place that requires people to do that. So we will be scratching our heads wondering, and people like me will always be questioning, is that really what's happening? Is that not what's happening? Why aren't we talking about this aspect of it? Why aren't we sharing this type of information?
Well, for example, why is it important to know the race of people who have COVID-19, who've contracted the coronavirus? Why is it important to understand gender? Why is it important to understand the age? Just those 3 factors.
Well, it's a couple of things. One, we need to know who's being impacted by this. We need to know that. If you want to solve a problem, the first thing you do is you identify what the problem is. And if you don't collect that data, then you don't know. You know, when we figured out in Michigan that African Americans were disproportionately impacted, 14% of the population, but 32% of cases and 41% of deaths, it was important for us to know that so we could understand why. People kept saying things like pre-existing health conditions. That might explain why they would be more likely to have complications or die if they were exposed. That didn't explain exposure. What we then found out is that African Americans were disproportionately forced back into the marketplace, forced to go out to earn income so they could keep the lights on and keep food on the tables for their families. Same exact thing happened with the Hispanic and Latin community in our state. But if we didn't have the data to show us and tell us that these groups were being disproportionately hit, there would have been no need to look further to figure out why. Because then the solution became clear. We need income support for people who are below a certain income level so they can actually shelter in place. You know, then one might say, well, that's obvious. But it took the data. It took having the bottom line and the what so to have what I consider to be a pretty well-meaning administration then take action. So I as an epidemiologist, think we always want to know what's so. It would be like attempting to go on a weight loss journey, not knowing how much you weigh. You just say, hey, I'm just going to start. I'm just going to, you know, when people get real serious about their fitness and losing weight, the first thing you do is you need to know what's so. And then you need to be able to track progress and monitor. If you change your eating and start eating a certain way, and in fact, instead of losing weight, you gain weight, you need to know that so you can change how you're eating. Same thing with COVID. You know, we talk a lot about disparities and say it's so important for us to narrow disparities. But so many states don't even collect the data. They can't say what the extent of the disparities are, nor can they say if what they do or how they intervene works or makes a difference. So to that end, I think it's important. And it's more than just race. It's more than just race. It's more than just gender. People with disabilities have had a real hard time during the pandemic. Many people living in rural communities have had a very hard time accessing resources. COVID took a little bit to hit the rural communities in Michigan. I can speak for Michigan.
Sure.
But once it did, it did.
Mm.
You know, so we need to be collecting that information.
Everybody, I want you to call us at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. We want to know from you how COVID-19 is impacting you now, because more and more states are opening up. They're opening up. 1/3, at least a third, really nearly 2 in 5 Americans have now received these shots. Are you now ready to go to church unmasked? Are you ready to go to a restaurant unmasked? Are you ready to go back to the musical theaters? I mean, to musical theater, to Broadway? Are you ready to go and see a play? Are you ready to go to the movie theater? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are we ready? Have the HVAC systems been improved? I mean, while we've been down, Dr. Deborah Verholden, I'm just wondering what work has been done to help us to re-enter a society in a more healthful way. Let's talk about that. Are you ready? Are you ready? Well, guess what? The reopening is here. Are we ready for it? I'm Santita Jackson, WCPT 820 in Chicago and AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Call me at 773-763-9278. Let's talk about the reopening in the midst of this pandemic. Back with Lord Santita Jackson Show in a minute. Thank you so much, Dylan. That was perfect.
Dr. Verholden dropped. I'm gonna try and call her. When I tried to call her back, it went to voicemail. But
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Well,
So much.
guys, Prince Charles is being photographed.
And you have
talking
Dr. Knighton's number as well, right?
I'm here.
Oh, Dr. Knighton, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
It's great hearing your voice this morning.
Yes, yours too.
Yes, yes, yes. Go this
sorry,
way.
I didn't.
Oh, I'm
my
sorry.
thing was turned down. Did you? So you do want me to call her back, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And if it's still on voicemail, just continue calling.
Yeah, just keep, because she could, anything could be happening with her phone.
Okay.
Okay. Dr. Knighton, boy, we got a lot to talk about today. LA has had no COVID deaths in 2 days. First time in 410 days. It's been a whole lot. Whole lot. Whole lot. Okay. So let me pull this up. 2 days. But it was okay. But there's so much. Oh, so you know what really we're on Facebook now. What continues to really kind of unsettle me, Dr. Knighton, are the numbers. You know, when you're trying to find out how many people have been vaccinated, the numbers are all over the place. They're always trying to disaggregate, and I guess to inflate the numbers to make it, to make it appear that more people have been vaccinated than have been. You know, because I can read an article and see like 5 or 6 numbers, and I think I'm fairly literate. It's like, wait a minute, what's the percentage, y'all? What is it? Well, 65 and older, and the 18 to 24, and I'm like, what's the percentage? Just how many? There's 331 million Americans.
Dr. Verholden's back.
Okay. Dr. Deborah Verholden?
Yeah, just phone calls dropping everything.
It's all good. We've got your girl, Dr. Shanita Knighton, here with us today.
Hey, Dr. Deb.
Hi, Dr. Knighton. Look, I was on a Zoom yesterday, and I saw a friend of mine with his daughter was in the background, and she had her mask down around her neck, and she had just gotten home from some event, and I did the Knighton demo, and I said, okay, let's say you're out, and I had my mask up, and then I had on a shirt and it had buttons, and it was just a little bit of my chest was exposed in my neck. Pulled the mask down when I got in the said, yeah, I get in the car, pulled the mask down. I said, where did the spray go when I was out? Somebody was around me. They said, oh, we're here. And I said, look, and then you pull your mask down. I said, then what happens when you get back out the car and you go back into the next door and you pull it out? He said, oh, my gosh,
A minute.
you just pull it right over your nose and mouth. I said, I know. So I said, I don't know why your daughter has a disposable mask going around her neck, but she's home. That mask should be in the trash now.
Wow.
I said, Dr. Knight would be so proud.
But you know what? Make that point when we get back on the air. Because these are the things that people need to hear. You cannot say these things enough. You know, you can't say them enough because people, they think that once they have this shot, they're home free. I've bumped into more and more people who believe that, you guys. That's what they're believing. They don't need to mask anymore. And, you know, I've had some friends who've gone to church. They've heard that. The pastors have said, okay, we've been vaccinated. Take off your masks. I've heard it all. I've heard it all over the past few weeks, past few days, past few days. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I mean, stand by, everybody.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. This is the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT 820 in Chicago and AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Hey, call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Do you have any questions about COVID-19? Do you have any questions about how to really move back into society as it's beginning to open up? More and more states are lifting all restrictions. Georgia, for example. No masks are going to be needed anywhere, anytime. Wow. Are we ready for that? Have we changed the HVAC systems? Are you still going to wear a mask? Should you wear a mask if you've been fully vaccinated? And on and on and on it goes. Now nearly 2 in 5 American adults have been fully vaccinated. And we've got great news out of Los Angeles. 10 million people over a 2-day period on Sunday and Monday. No COVID-19 deaths. First time in 410 days in more than a year that has happened. That's good news. But is that enough? We've got Dr. Deborah Holden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. And joining us, of course, is Dr. Santita Knight from Case Western Reserve University, registered nurse, PhD, one of the world's few infection prevention specialists. So we're so excited to have you back with us. And Dr. Deborah Holden, let's ask Dr. Santita about this while she's rapping us on our knuckles about how we're handling our masks and everything. You all were making a great... Oh, yeah. I mean, I've got her playing in my head, Dr. Deb. Every time I do anything, I'm like, oh, my gosh, what would Dr. Santita Knight do? What do you make of the... Are we ready to reopen, Dr. Knighton? Do we have the necessary information? Do we have the habits? Can we, when we get back out here, are we going to be as protected as we can be? Your thoughts?
So I think the thing is it's not necessarily that we're not ready. We have to stay ready, and people have to get ready. Meaning that we understand in the way in which we were living and functioning was not realistic for most, and that things do need to resume to some sense of normalcy. So what that means is we can no longer go back to the public not having an awareness as well as behaviors around infection prevention. And so when I look at what's happening right now, my concern is not only that things are opening up, is that we're not continuing to have these additive practices. And Dr. Dan spoke about this, what was it, last week when she was mentioning, that yes, the vaccines was supposed to be an added tool to the toolbox, not a replacement tool to all of the other tools in the toolbox. So there is supposed to still be the hand hygiene. There's still supposed to be the mask, the physical distancing when it's appropriate. And I cannot emphasize enough hand hygiene. Also, too, your immune system, making sure that you're conscious of where you are. So these are still some of the things that concerns me that because the vaccines are around, and I'm happy that people are, taking it upon themselves to add a layer of protection and get vaccinated, but they must understand that it is still not the end all be all, meaning that you can get vaccinated and still are not at risk of getting COVID. COVID still has long-term effects. So the bottom line is even if you're vaccinated, you still don't want to get COVID, and you still don't want to put yourself at risk of encountering someone that does have it, and that's being vaccinated or not.
Well, it's very interesting that you bring that up because Dr. Deborah Verholden, the head of Merck, Ken Frazier, said last year, he said, look, as we're developing the vaccine, this is before they came out, he said, really, I don't want the American public to believe that this is a silver bullet, because it's not. And the public will not be well served if they think that it is. And many people feel that once they've gotten the 1 dose or the 2 dose shots, and by the way, Denmark is now not going to allow the J&J vaccine to be in their country because they don't think it's safe. Well, that's interesting. And now we're using beer and money, and states are offering other incentives to get people to get the vaccine. But even when you know what? You can't make this stuff up. New Jersey is offering a shot and a beer. Detroit is going to give out $50 prepaid cards to anyone who drives a residence to a vaccine site. And as an enticement to get state employees to get vaccinated in Maryland, they're offering a $100 payment. Well, hold on. What do you all think about that? These inducements, Dr. Deb, and then you, Dr. Knighton.
Well, my thing is this. Number one, there was more attention and more concern for people having their subsistence needs met and people having what they needed to protect themselves during the pandemic, right? So there are a lot of families, everybody got their stimmy and they were super duper happy. But for a lot of people, they needed that extra financial relief. So these incentives now, it almost is counter to what we're trying to say. We're saying that the vaccine will help you, the vaccine will support you in maintaining your health and prevent you from getting really sick and prevent you from going to the hospital and prevent you from dying. But yet we got to dangle this big carrot out in front of people to get them to take it. I think we need both the carrot and the stick. What are the real things that people are dealing with around getting this vaccine? For some people, it really just is they don't have all the information that they need to feel confident in that choice. Some people are still grappling. They're like, well, I hear what y'all are saying, but then that goes against a lot of other things I'm hearing and seeing in the media. And I fundamentally believe that we owe it to people to be with them where they are, to honor them and to honor their choices, but to make sure that they have ongoing access to good and credible information from sources that they trust. And we need to get some of these resources out into community at the grassroots level so the real trusted and credible knowledge brokers can continue to do that work. So I don't know. Just dangling the carrot. I don't think that in and of itself is going to get the job done.
Well, because the media are only giving us one perspective, that this is what you need need to get it, and everything is fine. The people who have other experiences have been deplatformed, and that really undercuts we're trying to move toward healthfulness, right? That undercuts because you don't trust, and the media are already not trusted, Dr. Deb. They're not. So when they do that, when they only tell me one story, and when other people are having other experiences and they want to share them, if they share the experiences, then we can all benefit. But Dr. Knighton, what do you make of these inducements?
I think it's unethical. They're unethical. And Dr. Deb knows this too, that us as scientists, even if we are to offer our participants an incentive, it has to be done not in a way to entice them to be able to take the intervention or to participate in our studies. And what's so disturbing to me about this is when we talk about equity, when we talk about resources. And so the thing is, it speaks to me in saying that individuals that may be living in poverty don't have a right to make a choice because now if they're going to incentivize me and give me cash for taking this vaccine, and I know I got to keep the lights and gas on, am I getting ready to take that dangled carrot, as she described, or am I making this decision because I truly want to make this decision? And it's not helping because let's say the next pandemic comes around and now we need another vaccine. What if we don't have the money to dangle the carrot no more? Or what if it's to the point of where maybe things don't work out as positively as we need them to, but they've enticed people with this money? Then it then comes where when we are trying to make things equitable, it's almost like the boy that cried wolf. So now will we be okay with taking the incentives the next time it is attached to health, And I know that we are moving towards a preventative approach in our healthcare system. I just think that providing education, making sure that people understand what the benefits are. Like if somebody came and they told me, which is what I even explain to patients and people in the community, I tell them, I'm like, look, it's 332 million people about in the U.S., and there's about 1 million hospital beds. Those hospital beds prior to COVID were already occupied at about 85% occupancy and up. I said, that means that people with heart failure, people with high blood pressure, people with, let's say, a diabetes flare-up, car accident, child poisoning, pregnancy and childbirth, all of these things, these are individuals, these are human beings that are being seen in our healthcare system. So then you top that off with COVID, okay? And COVID then starts taking up the occupancy. That means that there are individuals that can't be serviced. So when I tell them that the vaccine is to help to decrease the clinically relevant cases of COVID, and what if it is your loved one that has to go in to get a surgery, emergency or not, have to go in for some sort of treatment, and a medical error can happen. Because you're talking about a healthcare system that's already overwhelmed and stressed, and we're human beings. Nurses, doctors, dietitians, they're all human beings, and so they can't guarantee your safety if they're overwhelmed. And so I think helping people to understand why the vaccines exist, opposed to saying it's the end-all, be-all, to go a further way.
What do you think if you get COVID-19, what do you do? I mean, how is it treated? First you, Dr. Knighton, and then you, Dr. Deb. How is it treated? We don't talk about that much. Dr. Knighton?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were wanting Dr. Deb to respond first.
Oh, no. You. I mean, just how are nurses treating these patients? Are there medicines? I mean, what? Because we don't talk about the therapeutics at all.
Right. And I was going to say, so you know that once someone gets COVID, there are medicines that they do take. So there are the remdesivirs. There are, therapeutics that they're given. There's COVID antibody therapy. There are a numerous amount of things that are done once an individual has COVID to be able to mitigate the symptoms. I think the problem is you don't know who's going to be a severe case or not. And so while these things are therapeutics, anything that's therapeutic, just like some vitamins, they take time to work. And so the problem is, and I use this analogy, do you want to prevent the gunshot or do you want to treat the wound? And in this case, when you're not understanding of what the severity of COVID may look like, then the prevention for some individuals that have all of these risk factors, it's going to be in their best interest that they will want to get vaccinated because they already have these risk factors even before getting COVID that can just turn them over to the other side. And we all know, like, we have something, our ACE2 receptors are like throughout our whole body, right? So when COVID is attacking your body, it's not just the saying, oh, I'm an infectious respiratory disease and I'm going to attack your lungs. It's going after the heart. It's going after the kidneys. We already know it's at the lungs. It's going after the brain. So there are so many different systems that are being, affected by this thing. And so I always tell people, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And that's whether you're vaccinated or not. I know individuals that have lost their hair. So if you're staying ready, even with the vaccine, I mean, I tell people, making sure that you're taking vitamin D doesn't hurt. Making sure that you are taking anti-inflammatories such as ginger. These are things that, you know, are natural. They're out there for us to be able to use in terms of anti-inflammatories. Lemon is good. Anything that's going to help to boost your T cells and your immune system. And so I continue to preach that, and that's with being vaccinated or not even being vaccinated.
Well, how do you take ginger? Do you eat it? Do you boil it? Put it in your food?
I know people that actually take small chunks of ginger and eat it. I know people that they don't boil it because, you know, as you boil it, it actually starts to take some of the nutrients out of the food. I mean, out of the actual ginger itself, like the benefits of it. It's just like they say when we overcook greens and we take the nutrients out of the greens, even though we don't care, we still like the way they taste.
Yes.
So it's the same exact thing with ginger. So you can juice ginger. You can chop it up. You can put it in a smoothie. I've seen people chew chunks. You can put it inside of your food. So there are different ways for you to be able to take it in. But I know that it has wonderful benefits.
Well, you know, Dr. Deb.
And I'm talking about the actual ginger root.
An actual ginger root, not actual ginger root. Okay. I remember a guy used to walk around the campus when I was at Howard, and he was chewing on ginger every day. It was like, this is interesting, but you know, he was into it. Dr. Deb, what do you want people to know about what they need to be doing to be as safe and as protected as they can be? Well, of course, we'll go back to Dr. Knighton on this, but you deal with public health. I mean, and you know, are part of, you know, the groups who issue the edicts that tell us what to do, what not to do, and it's very important to do that. Um, as we're reopening, as governors are saying, you don't need a mask in a restaurant, in a theater. I mean, any place. As churches are now beginning to open up fully, what should you do? I mean, how do you?
Well, I wouldn't take my health advice from a politician, right?
Okay.
You know, I just wouldn't. You know, it's you go to the right people for the right thing. You know, don't bring your car to me talking about my, you know, car's not idling right. I can't help you with that. You know, take your car to a mechanic.
Okay.
You know, so people should be getting, you know, advice and input and feedback from experts. And most people have access to these things. You know, most places have a functional county health department that is, even in the face of the CDC was providing wonky guidance, things were going up and down and other things. You know, I watched a lot of local health departments were providing really good, you know, information for people. I'm finding there's more Dr. Knightons and Dr. Furholders out in communities than I think many of us gave credit for. We're just typically people that don't get the mic. You know, literally, my daughter went viral on TikTok in a dance video. I said, well, maybe I need to have her dancing in the front of the video while I talk about equity and just narrate her dancing on some racial equity work. Right? It's just
why
like
not? Yeah.
Hello?
I'm not mad at you.
You know,
Why not? Yeah. If it will get the eyeballs.
One night, one day, 1.3 million views on a dance video. I'm like, I don't have 1.3 million views total over 10 years of fighting for my people.
Stop, to be fair. Her daughter's beautiful. So there's that. So, okay. But I'm hearing you, but I don't know if that's the best example, but I'm feeling you. I got you. And what you need to do is put that child to work and let her dance, and you talk behind her. I mean, because, you know, because people need information. Dr. Knighton, I have to let Dr. Deb go on that. I mean, her children are gorgeous, so I mean, put them up front, okay, and then you speak behind them, and you peek out every now and then because you're a looker too. So we're going to do all of that. But Dr. Knighton, what should we be doing? I mean, because what if you find yourself, say, in a theater and everybody's unmasked? Should you leave? Or do you put a mattress on your face? I mean, what do you do?
I'm still keeping my mask on. I'm making sure that I'm socially distanced. But I'll be honest, like, I would be trying to find somebody and asking them about what's going on with the air quality in there. So that would be me personally. I would not ruin my movie experience. I would make sure that I'm washing my hands while I'm in there. And it does depend on how crowded it is because, you know, people are going to laugh. People are going to laugh. People are going to talk. I mean, we just know what happens at the movie theater. That's why we go to a movie theater. So it's really evaluating what's going to happen in the setting that you're in. You know, if you know that it's out, I mean, it's indoors, and you know that the air quality isn't going to be good, or they're not having, let's say, adequate air exchanges, then yes, you are putting yourself at risk. But I think there's other factors that go into that would make that hard for me to just say, oh, well, don't go. So I would want to know, like, are they still allowing physical distancing in terms of seating? Is there somewhere where I would be able to sit where I am away from others? How does the pathway look in terms of me getting ready to leave? Am I going to wait until everybody else leave, or am I going to be the first to leave so I don't have to potentially deal with lingering droplets? So I think that there are a number of things that goes into that, you know, but I do know for sure that as we are getting back out to normal, we even had these discrepancies within our own families. So I might be the one that's saying, okay, I want to wear a mask, and, you know, these are going to continue to be the practices for me and my kids. But then my sisters, let's say, because Mother's Day is coming up, right? And so if everybody's going to want to be around mom, how do we make those decisions, understanding that everybody might have different values and practices? And to me, the safest place is, hey, meet me outside.
Okay, because I mean, what if you are in a public place and the host says, everybody's gotten their vaccine, take off your masks, let's have a good time? What would you do? Dr. Knighton, then you, Dr. Deb. What should you do?
So the problem is I'm already talking to people about that because I'm encountering that scenario that you just said more often than not. Well, everybody been vaccinated, so we good. And I said, so essentially, you do realize that COVID has long-term effects. And I'm like, if you realize it has long-term effects, you would want to know that, yes, it can stop you from dying. It can stop you from having severe symptoms. And it can, you know, make sure that it decreases COVID or your risk of COVID to a certain extent, and that's still being studied. So until we know that, in my opinion, prevention is better than treatment, and you should still, in my opinion, keep a mask on or take measures, because you really don't know, even too, just because somebody tell you they vaccinated, if they got vaccinated last week, maybe their antibodies haven't built up in their system yet good enough. So we really just don't know. And so if we are at an event and everyone's saying, oh, take the mask off and I'm vaccinated, then, you know, again, you make the decision there if it's worth the risk. And unfortunately, that is where we're at right now. I see a lot of people that they're living for now and not necessarily living for the future or even thinking about the future, because we've been masked for about a year now and that they don't really care. And that is the problem. The problem is they're not thinking about the long-term effects. And that concerns me.
Dr. Deborah Verholden, these vaccines are under emergency authorization. What's the difference between emergency authorization and FDA-approved drugs? Is there a difference?
There is a difference. And so for something to be FDA approved, it has to have substantial evidence of effectiveness, right? So whatever it is that the drug or the therapeutic, whatever it is that it purports to do, there has to be substantial evidence that, in fact, it does that. And then it's got to meet all the other standards, you know, the minimal risk, et cetera, all these things. What the distinction between an emergency use authorization and an actual FDA approval is, before you can build the case with substantial evidence, if you are in, whether it be a crisis, right, we're in a pandemic, or you may have an experimental cancer drug for a very rare cancer. Well, if you've got people dying of that cancer, you don't have FDA approval because you haven't quite accumulated the substantial evidence, air quotes, but you've gone through, you know, phase 1, phase 2, maybe even phase 3 clinical trials testing. You can apply for an emergency use authorization, which will allow you, once you've gone through the clinical trial phase, once you prove that the drug is safe, and appears to be effective as a treatment or as a preventive measure, et cetera, you can get an emergency use authorization so that it can be used by people who may be in need of it, even before the formal FDA approval. And the only difference in the bar is you've got to have substantial evidence. Pfizer is, I'm pretty sure, very close to now getting their actual FDA approval because they've got all of these people who've been vaccinated, and they now have substantial evidence that, in fact, the vaccine does what it claims to do. So it is almost like a level, if you will. Mm-hmm. Like an emergency use authorization doesn't mean you can't just make something up and get emergency use to use it because of goodwill or, some slight indication that it has effectiveness. But the bar for actual FDA approval is substantial evidence. And we now will have that for both Pfizer and Moderna. So expect that both will actually have the formal FDA approval in the months to come.
Everybody, Dr. Deborah Verholden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University, Dr. Shanita Knighton, Case Western Reserve University. Boy, oh boy, two of the best who are on the scene today. Indeed, Dr. Knighton, Infection Prevention Specialist. We're so privileged to have her come on this show with us, with Dr. Deborah Verholden, to get you the best information every day. Coming up, what about 90,000 persons who got 100 million pills? That is why West Virginia is suing these pharmaceutical companies. They said, you addicted us to these opioids. You hooked us on these drugs. Wow. I wonder if we could do that for crack. I guess not. More of the Santita Jackson Show on WCBT 820 in Chicago and AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Back in just a minute. Well, we can't do it for crack.
I know, but I almost hollered.
You could have.
I know, right?
Huh? I'm like, oh no, because
I didn't know that one was coming. That was funny,
honey.
That was.
I got the dry sense of humor from both my parents. Okay. I'm like, I wonder if we could do that for Cricky Crack. No, I guess not.
Right, but no, that was a good one.
Because you'd have to see.
But the opioid thing is very unique because, and CK can talk about this too because she led a lot of the litigation against these pharmaceutical companies. They specifically, there were things that they could have done that would have not messed up the medicinal value, but that would have altered the abuse potential.
Let me tell you something.
And they intentionally didn't do that.
But
with these poor working white people, they wanted to numb them out.
Okay. But not even just that. As somebody that was giving them, I'm going to tell y'all, don't get me wrong, this is a modern day crisis, quote unquote. But even back as far as 2009, as somebody that took care of that, when I was like, why are we giving them all of these meds? And it was like, because there's a classic quote that for patients, pain is whatever the patient says it is. So this is what they told us. So whatever the patient says their pain is pretty much what we have to treat. If they say that they're in pain, then we have to treat them in pain. And this is the stuff that they gave. They was giving 30 pills. If you got a teeth pulled, they wasn't saying, hey, take it for 5 days and then come back. So all of this stuff we have been talking about years ago, and you have no idea how many healthcare workers have been abused as a result of trying to save the very issue right now that our system is trying to fix. And I'm just going to add one more thing, because I know you got to go. But when we talk about heroin, right, and the fact that the ingredients are diacetylmorphine, and the fact that we give morphine in hospitals, and the fact that diacetyl is an ingredient that you find in your potato chips, you find in your popcorn, it's in the vaping stuff too. So it's an addictive part. It is an addictive component that's also that's in heroin. And so when you're looking at somebody that can't get away from the potato chips, they can't get away from, the popcorn, these kids that's now addicted to vaping and now they want to go back in the other direction. It's like y'all been knew this stuff was, y'all knew it was heroin. Y'all knew that we were consuming something that was highly addictive. And so I am happy that they're finally going after them. But it's sad because they've already made their money. And, of course, they got money to fight litigation now.
Of course. And that's why I am so glad that you all are here because you give us this truth. Because I'm telling you, this is a very real thing. It's very, very real. I mean, look, what did they put? What is it? Smoking cigarettes. I had a smoking cessation specialist on my old radio show. She said, look, the fact is this. And she was out of Northwestern University Hospital. She said, I am out of the hospital because smoking cigarettes, what they have put in these cigarettes, makes them more addictive than heroin.
Yeah,
I said, what? She said, oh, yeah, that's
they
why it's so
do.
hard for people to kick that habit. Because effectively, they have turned you into a drug
Ammonia.
addict. Come on. Come on. Come on.
Ammonia, though, like ammonia inside of a cigarette, ain't that crazy?
Well, you know what? These people, when they want to get you healthy, they get you healthy. But when they don't want you to be well, they know how to do that too. And that's what we're seeing. So, my lovely people,
Mr. McGreal's on.
we're gonna have Chris McGreal. Say hello to him very quickly before you go. Chris McGreal is the writer from The Guardian who has a tremendous book, everybody. And I want you to read it. He's been on the show before. American Overdose, The Opioid Tragedy in Three Acts. It is a great book. And he is the one who's really been doing this up close covering of this story. 90,000 people, 100 million pills. I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. Chris McGreal, how are you?
Very well, and yourself?
It's
Santita?
wonderful hearing your voice. I have Dr. Deborah Verholden. She's the Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. She's about to go, but she wanted to say hello to you. And I also have Dr. Shanina Knighton, PhD nurse. She's one of the few infectious disease infection prevention specialists in the world. There are not even 4,000 of them in the United States. And they wanted to meet you, say hello to you, and just really tip their hat to you for the wonderful work that you've done.
Well, good morning.
Hi. Good morning, and it's very nice to meet you. Yes.
Well, I have to talk fast because, I'm moving on to different segments. But I love these ladies. They are brilliant. And they, because we're trying to get real information out about our health, about COVID-19. And, because that's the third biggest killer in the United States. We still have diabetes, heart disease, obesity, all these other things. And they talk about this with us. And so I'm just so excited because they're both women of great accomplishment. And they share the information that they have with us on this show. And I'm so grateful. And Dr. Deborah Verholden, what can I say? She's a giant in the world of academia and epidemiology. And this young woman, Shanina Knighton, is just like our little baby in the struggle. This young lady, she is the first in her family to graduate from high school, college, graduate school, all of that. And she has chosen to be a light to the community. They're both incredible. Deborah Verholden got her PhD from Johns Hopkins at 24. I can't brag on them enough. Not brag, just the bragging is in what they do, but they don't do that. They just try to share. So I love you both, Dr. Knighton and Dr. Deb. I'm going to let you both go. Dr. Shanina, Dr. Deb, got a little nicknames, Chris McGreal. And sending you all much love, much love, and many blessings.
Likewise. Sending it right back.
Great show.
Thank you so much. Do we have CK Hoffler on, Dylan?
She has me to give her a couple more minutes before I call her back.
And CK Hoffler is one of the top lawyers in the world. In fact, she heads the National Bar Association, Chris, which is the largest and oldest black bar association in the world. More than 65,000 lawyers she's leading, like attorney Ben Crump and all of these, and so many people. She's also the chair of Rainbow Push, but she prosecutes cases just like this. Or not prosecute, she represents, the plaintiffs in this case. These are what she does all the time. She used to be Willie Gary's legal partner, and Willie Gary was featured on 60 Minutes some years ago, one of the top lawyers in the world, and she's one of those persons. So we're going to keep you on till the bottom of the hour, till 7:28, 8:28. And then I would love to have you come back as we go along through this. And I certainly would love to get your impressions on Minneapolis. Stand by, everybody.
Oh, yeah.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, Tuesday, May 4th, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820 in Chicago and AM 950 Radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to call me or text me at 773-763 WCPT 773-763-9278. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text. Want to hear from you. Want to know what you think about 90,000 persons who got 100 million pills, opioids. West Virginia is suing these pharmaceutical companies. We're going to talk with Chris McGreal, who's been covering this story, written a brilliant book about it. You know, we've had him on before, American Overdose. And we're going to talk with him about this historic lawsuit. And of course, we'll be joined by attorney C.K. Hoffler just to get the legal angle on that. At the bottom of the hour, we are also going to be talking about a tale of two voting rights cases. And you want to hear this because we've got to compare and contrast what's happening with voting rights. One person is going to jail, one's getting a slap on the wrist. One's white, one's black. Got to talk about all of that. But let us get some of these headlines so we can get right into this story today. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 55 degrees, cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, high of 59 degrees, partly cloudy. The Dow was up 238 points yesterday. The S&P 500 was up 11 points. The NASDAQ was down 67 points. In Major League Baseball, the Twins were triumphant over the Rangers, 6-5 today. We'll see if they can repeat. They'll be playing the Rangers once again. The White Sox will be playing Cincinnati today at 5:40 Central Standard Time. The Cubs will have a doubleheader with the Dodgers today, everybody. Well, what are some of the things that you need to know? Young teens could soon be eligible for the vaccine. In Los Angeles, for the first time in 410 days, they've had 2 consecutive days where they've had no COVID-19 deaths. Now 2 in 5 Americans have been vaccinated. What about you? Are you still protecting yourself, everybody? President Biden is going to raise the refugee cap to 62,500 people during this fiscal year after a backlash following an earlier decision to make a Trump-era cap of 15,000 people. Wow. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, the top U.S. general, has dropped his opposition to major policy changes on how the military will handle sexual assault, and he is open to removing the chain of command from involvement in investigations, everybody. It's World Press Freedom Day, everybody. The U.S. report reveals the startling extent of police violence against journalists in the United States in 2020, when we had really the protests that we haven't seen in 40, 50 years. Well, there were 438 physical attacks against journalists, 139 arrests, 110 cases of damaged equipment, 31 subpoenas, and most of these attacks on journalists came from the police. World Press Freedom Day, everybody. Got to keep the press open and free and protected. States are relaxing COVID-19 restrictions. Georgia is the latest to completely lift all restrictions. That is what's going to happen. You will not have to wear a mask anywhere. What do you think about that, everybody? And wow, let's talk about this COVID. Well, no, let's talk about the opioid epidemic. What is going on with that? Now we're seeing that there is going to be an historic lawsuit. 3 of the biggest American drug distributors are being sued by West Virginia for illegally flooding them with hundreds of millions of prescription opioid pills. I want to know what you think about this. How did this happen? Chris McGreal, you've written this tremendous book. Can't say enough about it. American Overdose, the opioid tragedy in 3 acts. It sounds Shakespearean. It sounds dystopian. It sounds crazy. It sounds like, wait a minute, 90,000 people, 100 million pills. Surely you've miscounted, Chris McGreal.
You think so, wouldn't you? And actually, that 90,000 people is just one county, Cabell County, which has the city of Huntington in it. And Huntington was at one point known as the overdose capital of America. But there were more than 1 billion pills, 1.1 billion pills delivered to West Virginia as a whole, a state with, a relatively small population more than 1 billion pills over a period of about 7 or 8 years. So this state was really targeted and just flooded with opioid pills through the 2000s at the height of the opioid epidemic, being driven, as it was at that point, by prescription pills rather than heroin and fentanyl.
When you say they were targeted, what do you mean?
Well, there are a couple of things that went on. This is a uniquely American epidemic. Other countries do not have this opioid epidemic. And one of the reasons it happened in this country is that you have companies that set about selling these drugs to anybody that would take them. And one of the first places they targeted were those parts of the country where painkillers were already being used, mostly because people there was a demand for them, perhaps because the population did a lot of physical work, and West Virginia definitely fitted that bill. There were a lot of miners and people in physically demanding professions. And what you see is the drug companies, they look at the pharmacy data. They see where pain relief is already being prescribed, and those are the places they targeted to sell opioids in the early 2000s. And that's really the beginning of it. They get the doctors on board. The doctors begin prescribing en masse, some of them because they're persuaded by the drug companies that these opioids are completely safe. They're not addictive when they're used just to treat pain, which isn't true. People became more and more addicted to them. Demand went up, and then you see it spill over into the wider epidemic that we've had.
Chris McGreal, it sounds to me like, when you give professional athletes or these athletes, college athletes in these income-generating sports, you give them drugs to get them through so that they can play with their pain, so that these minors and so that these working men and women can just keep on going. Is there something to that? Is that some of that behind this?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there was a big lie at the center of this push to sell opioids by the manufacturers. And it was essentially that you can take these opioids. Yes, in the past there's been fear in the medical profession about becoming addicted, but you can take these pills, and as long as they're countering pain, you won't become addicted. And actually, not only did that not turn out to be true, so the more people took, the more they needed them. But actually, over the long term, it turns out that not for everybody, but for a lot of people, these pills weren't particularly effective, actually, at combating pain, and that people just essentially ended up, if they were taking heroin or any other narcotic, needing more and more of them. And you saw it with athletes. In West Virginia and other parts of the country, for my book, I spoke to plenty of young people who were drawn in by being given pills for athletics, miners in West Virginia, people who've had major operations and then end up with long-term pain, people having them being prescribed them for chronic pain, living with something like Crohn's disease. All kinds of people were drawn in essentially by this false promise, this illusion that opioids were a magic bullet for pain.
When did it become obvious to West Virginians what was being done to them, and how did they react?
So it became obvious quite quickly to those parts of the country that were targeted, which included West Virginia, large parts of Appalachia, other parts of the country, up in the Northeast, for instance, again, where you have a lot of people involved in manual labor that's very physically demanding. It became quite apparent in the late 90s, early 2000s, that something was wrong. Doctors started to see more and more people using more of these drugs. It was clear that they were spilling over and being used for recreational use as well. And some doctors started ringing the alarm bells. And initially what you see is the same response that you saw to crack to earlier heroin overdoses, which is arrest people and lock them up. And then in time, they realize that's not working, and there's something deeper going on here, because actually, as you know, people in the FBI and the DEA have put it to me, you had doctors and drug company reps behaving like drug dealers and pushing these drugs. And eventually they wake up to the fact that actually there's a man-made tragedy on their own doorstep, and they need to come at it a different way. But I think that, you know, they've known for 20 years they have a problem on their hands. It just, the difficulty has been responding to it, not least because of the power of the pharmaceutical industry in making sure that, in effect, the federal government did very little.
We're speaking with Chris McGreal, brilliant reporter from The Guardian. And he's been writing for The Guardian for years, but you've got to get his book, American Overdose, The Opioid Tragedy in 3 Acts. It is a compelling view of what was done, quite frankly, with opioids in West Virginia and Appalachia, with poor whites, is what was done with crack with blacks in urban America. Chris, that's what I see. These drugs were just dumped.
Yes, certainly you certainly see in the trajectory of how the response to this opioid epidemic, when it's poor whites, when it's those areas of the country that are marginalized, the response is very similar to what you see in the crack epidemic. Absolutely. Go around, arrest people, throw them in jail. I mean, places like Eastern Kentucky and West Virginia, the jails were full of people. There are parts of the country where the majority of women who were in prison in those parts of the world were in prison because of opioids. You start to see the attitudes change when this becomes more of a middle-class white America problem. And then suddenly there's a little less urgency, a bit, the distinction, I guess, between crack and cocaine, right? The response is a little less urgency and willingness to throw people into jail in quite the same way.
Well, with opioid addicts, they're seen as people with problems. Crack addicts are seen as problem people. And there is a difference. And now with crack, people didn't have legal recourse, right? Gary Webb, may he rest in peace, found that there was a government connection between the crack being pushed in the black communities. But now it's interesting. These communities have legal recourse, which is, a very interesting trajectory in America. Whites get legal recourse and black people really get jail. So where is this lawsuit going? What is the basis upon which they are going to sue these pharmaceutical companies? Because I can see the pharmaceutical companies saying, well, you took these pills because you wanted them.
Yes. Well, I mean, as you say, that you're absolutely right about that trajectory. But it took 20 years to get there. Yeah. That wasn't the initial response, But they're suing that these 3 drug distributors, McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, and Cardinal, amongst the biggest companies in the country. McKesson is the 5th largest corporation in America, although I imagine most people haven't heard about it. They deliver pharmaceutical drugs to around the country. That's part of what they do, make a lot of money from doing it. And they're being sued on the grounds that essentially they flooded these pills into West Virginia without fulfilling their legal obligations. There's part of the, you might call it, contract or privilege of being allowed to essentially monopolize the delivery market for pharmaceuticals is that they're required by law to cut off deliveries that are suspicious, to report deliveries to pharmacies that might seem out of the ordinary. They're supposed to report them to the DEA. And even as you had, for instance, there's a very small town in West Virginia called Kermit, population's only about 390 people. There were 9 million pills went through this one pharmacy in this town. Even as they were delivering pills to this pharmacy, they didn't tell the DEA. They didn't report it. And that's the basis of the lawsuit, that the drug distributors failed in their legal obligations. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were putting profit above people. And part of the evidence against them is that actually they have paid repeatedly civil penalties for breaching those regulations. Just a couple of years ago, McKesson, the largest of the drug distributors, paid a $150 million civil penalty to the Drug Enforcement Administration for failing to report suspicious deliveries. So, and they have a pattern of that. They paid out hundreds of millions over time, and they have a pattern of that, and essentially they buy their way out of any kind of corporate criminal responsibility by paying these civil penalties. But there have been previous cases against them.
Well, this is CK. This is your wheelhouse. Before we get to you, let me get Otis, because Otis has a question for Chris McGreal. Otis, what's on your mind?
Hey, good morning. I was calling because I was just thinking about. I'm listening to the conversation. I just came in. I just listened to it like 6 minutes ago. My question is to the author. You was talking about the drugs in the Black community. Would you say that is would you say that the United States have hired gang members and to help sell those drugs in the Black community, and that's one of the reasons why we have a lot of problems in the Black community when it comes to violence against each other?
I have to say that's not really my specialty. Yeah. I mean, I looked into the whole area around how these drugs came to be in the country and in the United States, why the United States uniquely has this kind of epidemic. And I looked at the part since played by the cartels in places like Mexico in delivering heroin and fentanyl, but I haven't actually got into the part played by the gang on the ground. Although I know that the process of delivering drugs to people has become much more sophisticated and less violent than it was, say, back in the 1980s.
Well, and I would recommend that you look at Gary Webb's work. Gary Webb is no longer with us on this earthly plane, but he's someone who fought very, very hard to get that story out here. And he was widely discredited in life and received some redemption in death. And he died under mysterious circumstances. Gary Webb, 2 B's. Look him up. Award-winning reporter. He was the one who dug into the crack epidemic in the Black community and where the crack came from and how it was deliberately placed in the Black community. Let me go to you, C.K. Hoffler. You've been listening to Chris McGreal, the author of American Overdose, The Opioid Tragedy in 3 Acts. What do you make of this lawsuit?
Well, first of all, Santita, thank you for having a discussion on this issue. I litigate right now against these pharmaceutical companies that are responsible, and this is nothing more than just the same type of duping, intentional duping of the American public that the tobacco companies did. It's the exact same pattern. The only difference is, because again, just like with tobacco, smoking, nicotine and all that, that's legal. Opioids are also legal. Opioids are really the legal drugs because they were prescribed by doctors that have been flooding the markets, and they do impact significantly the African American community. I filed a lawsuit along with Beasley Allen in representing the city of Flint, Michigan. And so I just want people to understand that this opioid epidemic is now real in the African American community and in our urban centers. It's real in Black and brown communities. It is also a pandemic. A lot of people don't recognize, because a lot of the statistics are not there, that people that we're seeing incarcerated in our community are no longer, by and large, the crackheads and all that. And I hate to even labeling on that, but someone who has crack addiction, but they have opioid addiction because it's so simple to become addicted. If you are a woman like I am, who had a C-section, you're going to be given opioids. Period. In the discussion when you're in the hospital. That is how easy and how fluid and how frequent opioids are prescribed. And opioids are highly addictive. And certain types of opioids, it takes less than 10 days to become addicted. And if you've gone through C-section pain, as I have, then you know that it's not beyond the stretch of the imagination to still have opioids in your system way after you have had the surgery. So this is really a pandemic. It's just something that people aren't focused on. I remember when our legal team had meetings with various mayors and the like of cities, predominantly African-American cities, initially there was shock. They absolutely didn't realize the impact, because this is how it happens. When someone gets a call, the police get a call, or the fire department gets a call that someone they think is strung out on drugs, but they're opioids. So they come in, they have to administer a Narcan to get them back, to revive them. So you've got the police department, the ambulance, or the fire department that are all descended on someone who people think is dead. Then you've got the administration of something to revive them, and then they're taken to the hospital. But at that point, these people are addicted. They are addicted. And opioid addiction is like crack addiction. They're going to go back out on the streets to get that fix because they're addicted. And so you have middle class folks in the Black and brown communities as well who are addicted to opioids. And the way that the reason why the cities and the counties and the states are bringing this litigation is because it's a drain on their resources. All that it takes in that circle of treating this person, that's a drain on the resources of the cities, the counties, and the states. It's a pandemic, and it's in our communities in a huge way. And that's why there's litigation ongoing. We've sued 22 different parties, including the manufacturers, the distributors, and in some cases, there are doctors are being sued because they used to run what we call pill mills. So there's a real issue in our community as well.
Well, you know what, Chris McGreal, I want you to stay on just after the break, and I want you to give us a closing thought, because we're going to be following this case, because perhaps other cases will emanate from this case. But we need you to tell us why this case is so significant. And then right after that, we're going to be talking about a tale of two voting rights, tailing voting rights in two different cases. One white, one black, one went to jail. The other one got a slap on the wrist. The other one actually committed a crime. The other one didn't. Ooh, you can't miss it. Santita Jackson Show, back in just a minute. Oh, wow. Chris McGreal, you all are right on the money. Thank you so much for this, Chris.
Oh, my pleasure.
Oh, no. I mean, you're doing such great work, really. Really, really, really. And I said, oh, wow. Look
Absolutely.
At this. Oh,
absolutely. And, it's just something that people don't realize is happening, because it is sort of it's a middle class kind of thing, but there are entire communities that have been, paralyzed really because of opioid addiction.
Well, you know what, also.
And families.
Well, they've been, but I think when Black people see this, CK and Chris, Black people are angered by how the opioid addicts have been treated with, their humanity's been left intact.
Oh, yeah.
They're addicts. And crack,
well,
crackheads and
I'd agree with you, sir.
Yeah.
I'd agree with you, Santita. I mean, I think Black community has every right to be angry. But I would just say, if you go back 10 or 15 years before it was being talked about the way it is, when it was, poor white miners in West Virginia, they were talked about in those same.
Oh, no, wait.
Absolutely.
I totally agree with you.
Once it split, became middle class.
Oh, yeah.
Became.
Oh, no. Wait a minute. I'm totally with you, because look, white people have contempt for poor white people. Ask Bill Clinton. That was part of his problem, that he was not to the manner born. I'm with you. No, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, generally speaking, even the fact that there was
I think that's one reason it went on so long.
Yeah, of course.
I think that's one reason it went on so long is because it was West Virginia and places like that, Eastern Kentucky. A lot of people in this country went, well, what do you expect? Hillbillies, and it was just dismissed.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask you about them numbing these poor working class white people out, just to keep them working, right? With your black lung disease, and and everything else. I know you're sick, but just get down in that mine. Go down in that shaft just one more time.
And you know, and Chris, I know
2 minutes and David Daly's here.
Think about it. At its core, these opioids were designed to kill the cancer pain. Because that's what they were designed to do. So just imagine, and we've all lived through family members or loved ones, or some of us have had cancer.
Absolutely.
And so imagine how potent a drug is or has to be to kill cancer pain. It's very potent. It's very potent. So when you have that on the market and it's being used to do other things, to kill, like if you're an athlete, you just take some opioids, it's going to kill the pain. You can go out and play. If you're working in the coal mine, you can go back. You can be injured. Your back, your sides, and everything. If you're working in the mills, if you're working on the assembly line in Michigan, you can go back out there because you're going to be treated with opioids. And initially, the doctors were duped. The doctors were told, and by the way, and these lawsuits also, the federal government is named in some capacity because they had a duty, when they approved these drugs, they have a duty to make sure that the manufacturers and the distributors do certain things, inform the public of the nature, and they did not do that.
Stand by. Well,
so
look,
the federal government is complicit as well.
Of course, well, they were complicit in slavery. They're complicit in making poor people work. Black, white, brown, yellow, and red. And I hope that people are getting that from this discussion too. That poor people of all colors are under the boot. I'm sorry.
You see with the federal government exactly what happened with for a while with tobacco, what you see with the energy companies and climate change, and what you see with the FAA and Boeing actually is the industry simply takes over regulation effectively.
Absolutely.
And that's what happened with the FDA.
Well, stand by.
It didn't do its job.
Coming up.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. WCPT 820 in Chicago, AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul. And meet up with my Facebook, my Santita Jackson Morning Stars, over on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, and on WCPT's Facebook page, and the Reverend Jesse Jackson page, and on my YouTube channel. Everybody, please like and subscribe on my new channel, the Santita Jackson Show. Of course, we're getting closing thoughts from Chris McGreal before we go into this this horrifying tale of two persons. I guess this is the legal hour, Chris McGreal, where this is all very interesting. He is the author of American Overdose, the opioid tragedy in 3 acts. We're seeing something historic, everybody. We're seeing West Virginians. We're seeing poor white people take on these giants. And Chris, I hope they win.
Yeah, it's an interesting case, partly because it's actually a bellwether case. It's one of a series of federal cases. They're going to decide whether the drug manufacturers, the distributors, the pharmacy chains were complicit in creating the opioid epidemic. And if they were, how much they have to pay. Is there going to be a settlement like there was with big tobacco in the hundreds of millions? And this is the first case to go to trial. There had been a similar case up in Ohio, but the distributors and others, the manufacturers, settled on the courtroom steps just before it was going to open, agreed to pay a few $100 million. This case has actually began yesterday. We're going to get to hear the detail. What did these drug companies know? When did they know it? And what did they do about it? And so it's not just important for part of West Virginia. It's actually going to be very important for the opioid epidemic as a whole across the United States.
Everybody, Chris McGreal, I hope you will come back very, very soon and keep us updated on this case because it's so important. In the meantime, everybody, you need to get his book, American Overdose, the opioid tragedy in 3 acts. He outlines this opioid tragedy. Please let me know the number of persons and the number of pills before you go.
Sorry, I missed that last part.
Oh, if you could just, before you go, the number of persons involved in this and the number of pills? You said like 1 billion pills?
Well, yes. So it was Cabell County, includes the city of Huntington. That's an area of about 90,000 people. There were 100 million pills delivered to that county over a period of just 5 years.
Unbelievable, everybody. Chris McGreal, everybody. Chris, it's always a joy to have you on this show. Blessings to you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. Everybody, what about the case of Crystal Mason and Brad Bartman? They've been handled a little bit differently, everybody. Now, we all remember Crystal Mason, who had been in jail, and her mother urged her, okay, you're out now. You're out now. You're on probation, but you're out. So now you can go vote. She mistakenly thought that she could vote. And when she went to the precinct, she asked the judge. She explained her situation, and the judge said, oh, yeah, you can vote. And she voted, and boy, oh, boy, that's where her troubles began. But guess what? There's a gentleman by the name of Brad Bartman, and he said, I listened to too much propaganda. He was sentenced to 5 years probation after he admitted illegally casting his dead mother's ballot for former President Trump and registering another dead woman as a Republican in Pennsylvania. He gets probation. She gets jail time. David Daly, the author of Unrigged, that is your latest book, and the first one is Rat Effed. I think Crystal Mason was Rat Effed. And of course, the C.K. Hoffler, the president of the National Bar Association, is staying with us because, of course, we have to cover the legal waterfront on all of this. What do you make of these two different cases, David Daly?
Oh, good morning, everybody. This is a horrifying example of just how uneven our justice system is. It is yet another example of how the Republican big lie over election fraud has just metastasized and it consumes everything in its wake, and just how dangerous that it is. Mr. Bartman, and I say that name reluctantly in Chicago. This had nothing to do with the Bartman and the Chicago Cubs. His mom dies in 2008. His mother-in-law dies in 2019. He requests absentee ballot applications on behalf of both of them. He casts the one in his mother's name. The system catches it. It notices that a ballot was cast on behalf of someone who had died, because the system actually works and catches voter fraud, which is why it's so rare. And they went to him, and he then signs an affidavit asserting, oh, no, my mom is alive. That's her vote. So there's the lie when he requests the absentee ballot. There's the lie when he sends it in. And then there is the lie when he is called on it. This is intentional, and it's in bad faith all the way through, from the initial application to the fraud to those folks who were investigating it. He is given probation. Crystal Mason, on the other hand, is out on probation. She casts a provisional ballot, which is what a provisional ballot is intended to do. You're not sure if it counts. There were 44,000 of them in Texas that year. The vote, in fact, was not counted because, again, the system did its job and it recognized that she was not able to vote. But it's confusing because there's this patchwork of laws in Texas governing who is and who is not able to vote. The state isn't always good at telling you this. When Crystal Mason's right to vote was revoked, they sent a letter to her house. The trouble is she was in prison at the time. They sent the letter to the address where she was in. And then, several years later, when she's out on the tax fraud charge, that letter is nowhere to be seen. So she asks if she can cast her ballot. She is told, well, why don't you go ahead and cast a provisional ballot? So that's what she did. It wasn't
counted. There was nothing intentionally fraudulent here, right? It's the exact opposite of the Bartman case. She is asking, she's following the rules, the vote that wasn't counted. All of this is in good faith. And she's given 5 years in prison, and an additional 10 months is tacked on for violating the terms of her parole. It is impossible to look at these two cases and believe that this is not a warning sign. This is a warning sign being sent largely to Americans of color. That is, if you participate in this system, you do so at your own risk. They are making an example out of Crystal Mason while Mr. Bartman in Pennsylvania is skating through.
It's unbelievable, CK. She gets 5 years in prison. He gets 5 years probation. And he actually committed the crime. Help me.
Well, I wish I could help you. There is no help that one could provide to that because it's just wrong, and more wrong. It's just wrong. When you commit a crime, the difference between a crime and having civil liability is the intention. You have to intend to harm, to do harm. He clearly intended to harm and to do harm. He intended to defraud. Fraud, as in fraud. He intended to do that. She, on the other hand, did everything she could to make sure that she was doing the right thing, understanding she was in the system. And yet, she had a sentence that was stiff, and the extra 10 months was just for violating parole. And by the way, she didn't. See, that's the thing. She did the things she was supposed to do. He did not do the things he was supposed to do. So that is as glaring of a case as we can get of the racial disparity in this country. I mean, it really is. It really is. It's unfortunate. So from a legal standpoint, there is no justification. Quite simply, there isn't. You can't justify that. Intent, that element of intent to commit a crime is the same no matter where you go. It's the same no matter where you go. It's sort of like how we see a Derek Chauvin beat and kill George Floyd, and that's a case where or not beat, but it's a beating when you don't let someone breathe. But that's a case where there was justice served, but there's so many other cases where it's not served. And then you have a police officer in Buffalo who intervenes, who tries to stop someone from being killed by a police officer, and she loses her job. She's sued by the police department and the police unions, and it takes 15 years for her to get justice. And what's the difference? A lot of the white police officers, and I'm not saying across the board this is the case, don't get a slap on the wrist, or there are no ramifications if they shoot and kill Black and brown people. And yet when there's a police officer who's trying to do the right thing to prevent a crime from being committed, excessive use of force, she loses everything and becomes almost homeless. And that police officer is African American. There's something very wrong with that system, and that's what we have to fight against. We have to level the playing field.
Everybody, what do you think about this? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. I mean, is this voter suppression? I mean, what is this, David? I mean, you tell me what you see.
I think it's intimidation. I think it's clear. It's a clear warning sign that maybe if you don't know your status and you're a little confused about it, that you might not go out and participate, even if your status is A-okay, because you see the risk that you might be taking. There's a similar example back in North Carolina, where, it's similarly, if you are out on parole and probation, you are not eligible to vote. And these laws are different in every state. There's a patchwork of these election laws, and they kind of intersect with criminal law in a really confusing way. And say if you move in the middle, you can really get caught up and not understand what the exact
conditions on you are regarding your eligibility. So you had 12 people in Alamance County in North Carolina who were similarly charged for this mistake of believing that they were eligible to vote, attempting to go to the ballot, cast a poll, and having that ballot be flagged in the system. And they were later arrested and charged. And again, 9 of those 12 people in Alamance County were Black. So you can see what is going on here. It's pretty clear. There are 2 other examples in Pennsylvania of white men who registered either their son or, again, a dead mother as Republicans in order to vote for Donald Trump in November of 2020. Those cases are still pending. And it seems as if, judging on what happened to Mr. Bartman, that those cases, again, are simply going to be probation, you're fine, little slap on the wrist. And those are the intentional cases that ought to be caught and punished. And I think what's so important to notice here is that Republicans have been pushing this big lie about voter fraud and the 2020 election and dead people voting and all of the voter fraud they talk about in Detroit, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia, right? Because they like to create the Black cities as somehow these bastions of voter fraud, right? And yet, what we see, who is actually being charged, are white people casting ballots on behalf of their dead mother-in-law for Donald Trump. The big lie has got tentacles, and all of them are big lies too, right? We keep being told that we need more strict voting laws in state after state, and they're passing them. And their justification is that, well, Republicans don't believe in the integrity of the system, and we have to somehow assure them that votes are safe and secure. Not only are their votes safe and secure, but time and again, they're the ones who are ripping the system off.
But you know what, David? Excuse me, CK, Attorney Hoffler? He apologized for his conduct and pleaded guilty to 2 counts of perjury and 1 count of unlawful voting. He said, and I quote, "I was isolated last year in lockdown," he told the court. "I listened to too much propaganda and I made a stupid mistake." CK?
That's heartbreaking, you know? I mean, listen, I don't want to see anybody sentenced to prison.
What kind of
You know what I mean?
I don't want to see anyone. I'm not. Look, I don't do Schadenfreude. I am not trying. I'm not glorying in someone else's downfall. I'm not. But he gets to apologize to the court.
Yeah.
And that's the end of it. And this woman.
And you know,
oh, come on, talk to me. No.
You know, I'm just sorry. You know, I the hypocrisy of this is just astounding. It's astounding. I commit a crime. Oops, I'm going to apologize. You know, my mind was lost and everything. Yeah. And that's going to be sufficient to get probation. Whereas somebody else is going to jail for 5 years. It's just, you know, and I agree with David. This is all voter suppression. And it is very, very, it's the clearest example of how voter fraud doesn't really happen at the level that many who are making this a partisan issue say that it happens, because you get caught. That's why the systems are set up to catch this. You get caught. A provisional ballot. Just think of, not only did this young lady not have the intent, she cast a provisional ballot not knowing if it should be. I mean, if that's the case, then everybody who casts a provisional ballot should be put in jail for 5 years, because when you cast a provisional ballot, you're not sure. They don't know if you are eligible to vote, if you're running at the right precinct. There could be something that's wrong with your ID. All of those things. So I guess all those people in the country and in the world, around the world, who are American expats who cast a provisional ballot should go to jail for 5 years. That's how ridiculous that is.
But
This woman did the right thing, and now she's sitting in jail. I mean, that's voter suppression.
But CK, she asked the judge. She explained her situation to the judge in the precinct. And she said, because I'm not sure. My mother told me to come. So your mother tells you to go, you go. I get that. And she said, she explained herself to the judge. The judge said, oh, no, you can vote. She was not given any space at all.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, David, he lied. He voted in his dead mother's name and then registered someone else who was dead. He knowingly did this. He gets 5 years.
One person did this by accident. Yeah.
He said, I was stupid. I was locked away. What?
We were all stupid and locked away last year, and we all didn't register our dead family members to vote, even though we were all passionate about the outcome of the 2020 election, because we knew it was against the law, so we didn't do it. He had the intent here to break the law. He did so twice and then lied about it to investigators, signed an affidavit attesting his dead mother was actually alive and had cast that ballot. And he gets, essentially a slap on the wrist. I mean, I empathize with the apology. I think that what the Fox News right-wing media entertainment complex has done to brainwash Americans and tear families apart is horrifying and sad, and maybe this will be a warning to other people. But the disparity between these two cases is exactly what is wrong with the American justice system.
Where do we go from here? What's going to happen to Crystal Mason? I mean, does she have more legal jeopardy? CK, I mean, what? I mean, it's just all so unjust. It's so naked.
Santita, I think because she's committed, I'm sorry, I heard some interference, because she committed a crime previously, and because she had a record, she unfortunately is in a very, very compromised position. I hope that she has a legion of lawyers just on principle that on a pro bono basis will take on her case and fight for justice. I hope she does. I'm not familiar with her legal team and how it's being handled, but I certainly would hope that she reaches out and tries to contact, she's probably not listening, but someone affiliated with her tries to contact anyone from the National Bar Association so that a team can get together to try to help her. There's so many entities that would try to help this young woman because of the inequity of what's happened to her. The complicating factor is, of course, she had a record, and that doesn't bode well for her, but it doesn't mean that she should be in jail. And that's why, I hate to come back to this, we need to restore people's voting rights. We need the passage of H.R. 1 and H.R. 4, because that would stop the states from randomly, capriciously, arbitrarily imposing these draconian laws and sentences, if you will, because of voting related issues. We need to have a federal, that's what we need to have. Because otherwise this is going to continue to happen.
It's going to continue. I mean, your closing thought, David Daly, author of Rat Effed and Unrigged. You need to get those books, everybody. I'm about to go out on StreamYard with Facebook and everything, but I promise you we'll be back tomorrow, but we're going to continue on the air. Talk to me. Your closing thought.
When voter fraud happens in this country, it tends to be caught. There's a reason why it's so rare. We have an entire system set up in order to catch it. When that dead person voted, the computer in Pennsylvania flagged it. Investigators began looking into it. It's a reminder, right, of what happened in North Carolina's 9th Congressional District a few years ago in the 2018 race, where you had a Republican operative going around town collecting absentee ballots and saying he was going to return them for people. It's really hard to get away with election fraud. It's obvious when it is happening. And it's a really ridiculous and silly way to try to win an election. It's brutally inefficient. And what we are seeing now is that all of these lies about voter fraud are turning into aggressive new restrictions in states across the country. They're being used as pretext for these laws that will further suppress the vote and make it more difficult for specific kinds of people to cast ballots. On the other hand, there are these human stories like Crystal Mason of what happens when individuals get caught up in this patchwork of insanity that has followed the big lie on voter fraud, and it is absolutely heartbreaking and unjust.
You know, everybody, that's why we bring these stories to you, because we need to know what's going on in our world. But you know what? Take heart. Don't be faint of heart. Get registered. Vote. Get the Justice and Policing Act, named after George Floyd, get that passed. For the People Act, get that. Interestingly enough, Republicans support that. A majority of them do. People are pushing for justice all over the ideological spectrum. Let us come together and make a more perfect union, a more just society. We can do it together. We've got to do it together. Get David Daley's books, brilliant books, Unrigged, How Americans Are Battling Back to Save Our Democracy, and Rat Effed, How These People Tried to Take Your Democracy From You. I'm Santita Jackson. I cannot wait to be with you in the morning. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, the brilliant one, the people's attorney. Chris McGreal, thank you. Dr. Shanina Knighton, thank you. Dr. Deborah Verholden, thank you. Pastor Stephen Thurston, thank you. I love you, Morning Stars, and my whole audience. I love you, love you, love you. Thank you, Dylan, for a great show, everybody. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. God bless. All right, everybody. God bless you all.